Speed is not just a number, it's a drug. But Porsche isn't about speed. Porsche is about controlling speed. They don't build cars for everyone. They're built for those who understand, who can hear every revolution of the engine like a chord, who feels the car not with their hands, but with their spine. In this movie, we will not just tell the story of the brand. We're going to show how one family name created a cult, how stubbornness became a philosophy, and why, despite all the fashion waves, Porsche has never buckled, ever. It all began in the town of Maffersdorf, Austria-Hungary, 1875. A boy, Ferdinand Porsche, is born into a tinsmith's family, an ordinary family. No money, no connections, but in the boy's head, not bodywork, but electricity. He was different, literally. While his peers raced him around the yard with sticks, he assembled electrical circuits. Already in his teens, he was hooking up houses to lights, working with wiring, and even sneaking lectures at a technical university, without a degree, without a license, simply because he couldn't help but study. At 18, he took a job at Bella Egger and Company, and immediately stood out. There, in Vienna, he created the world's first electric car with motorized wheels. Yes, in 1900. It was called the Lohner Porsche Mixte, and it looked like a battery-powered carriage. But it caught on in France at an exhibition. That's when Europe first heard the name Porsche. His interest in cars grew, and in 1906 he joined Austro-Daimler, not just as an engineer, but as chief engineer. There he built sports cars for racing. Yes, even before the First World War. Victories, recognition, and then the war. Like everyone else, everything fell apart. But Porsche already had a goal, and he knew where he was going. After the war, Europe was torn to pieces. Unemployment, hunger, political chaos. But Ferdinand Porsche doesn't go into depression. He decides no more working for others. In 1931, he opens Dr. Ing H.C. F. Porsche GmbH, his own engineering office. It doesn't make cars. It designs cars for other companies. It is in this workshop that drawings are created for the cars that will be assembled for Zundap, NSU, Wanderer. But Porsche wants more. He's looking for an idea that will revolutionize everything, and fate throws him that idea in the face of politics. Germany is entering a phase of industrialization. In 1933, Adolf Hitler comes to power. One of his slogans, "Every German must have an automobile." The project, People's Car. Price, no more than 1,000 Reichsmarks. Must go 100 kilometers an hour. Simple, reliable, durable. Hitler meets Ferdinand in person and commissions him to design this car. Why him? Because no one else could do it. Because Porsche already had the experience, the ideas, and most importantly, the obsession. And so begins the Volkswagen project, a project that would forever inscribe the Porsche name in world history. In 1938, a gigantic factory begins to be built in Wolfsburg, specifically for the new car, the Volkswagen Beetle. It's not called the Beetle yet, it's simply KDF Wagen. Kraft durch Freude, strength through joy. It's a scary name. But the point is simple. It was a people's car, in the most literal sense. Reliable, simple, rear-engined, and air-cooled. The prototype of the future Porsche. But the world didn't give it a chance. In 1939, war breaks out. Volkswagen, instead of cars for families, begins to produce military Kubelwagene and Schimmwagene, and Porsche himself develops vehicles for the army, including the Tiger heavy tanks. Ferdinand Porsche is a genius, but in wartime, he's an engineer in the service of the regime. After the war, he pays the price. First, arrest by the Allies, then prison. While the father sits, the son, Ferry Porsche, is left alone, with a workshop, with hunger, with a dream. He realizes if they don't make their car, the family name will disappear, and so the first Porsche is born. Gmünd, Austria, a small wooden workshop in which only furniture could be assembled. But it is there, in the midst of a devastated Europe, without resources, without money, without a father, that Ferry Porsche undertakes the impossible. He decides to build a car from scratch, which will not just drive, but give joy. Why? Because he couldn't find a single car he liked. The son of a great engineer decided that it was time to stop designing for others and start building his own. And so the Porsche 356 was born. The frame was a tubular frame, the body was hand-built aluminum, and the engine was a reworked Volkswagen engine. Every screw was hand-torqued. There was no production line, there were dreamers. The first 356 was ready in June 1948. It was as light as a bicycle and rode like a bicycle on rails, only 40 horsepower, but it was fast. Why? Because it wasn't heavy like the American dreadnoughts. It had balance. And it's at this point that the Porsche philosophy begins. Not power, but efficiency. Not pomp, but precision. Not style, but substance. First customer? A Swiss racing driver. He didn't buy a 356. He begged to be sold. That's how the brand was born. No advertising, no showrooms, no logo, just speed, just the thrill of the turn. Ferry recalled, "When I built the 356, I realized I had built a car that made people happy." Europe was rebuilding after the war. People wanted speed, they wanted freedom, they wanted to forget the horror and feel alive. That's why motor racing in the 1950s became more than a sport. They became a catharsis. Porsche realized this before anyone else, and it didn't start racing when there was a time. It was when there was nothing, not even money. But every trip to the track was marketing, free, powerful, emotional. In 1951, the Porsche 356 SL competes in the 24 Hours of Le Mans. It's the greatest race on the planet. It's not where the fast ones win, it's where the reliable ones win. Porsche goes there and wins its class. The first Le Mans, and it's a trophy. And the whole motorsport world goes, who are these people? Then the Carrera Panamera. It wasn't a race, it was a 2,000-mile hell through Mexico, where people died, where cars exploded at 150 miles an hour. Porsche didn't go there to win, it went there to survive. And they survived, and they won. That's when the Carrera was coined, in honor of the race, and also the term Porsche handling, a control where the car doesn't come off, but invites you to dance with the road. Every race win was more than a trophy. It was an argument with the world, in which a small brand from Germany proved that engineering can be an art. And most importantly, Porsche didn't use the wins to sell t-shirts. They used the money from sales to build even crazier cars. By the end of the 50s, the 356 was obsolete. Yes, it still gave you a thrill, but the world was moving on. The Americans were making V8 muscle. The Italians were making V12 powered Ferraris. And even the Japanese were starting to catch on. A new car had to be made. Inside the company, the argument was fierce. Keep the rear-engined layout? Or go for a classic with the engine at the front? Make it sportier or more civilian? In the end, it was Ferry's decision. And he made the riskiest decision of his life, to leave the engine at the back. In 1963, the Porsche 901 appeared, and then Peugeot burst in with the claim, "We have a patent for 3-digit numbers with a 0 in the middle, so what the hell with it?" They rename it the 911, and the whole world remembers that number forever. The design is done by Ferdinand Alexander Porsche, Ferdinand's grandson. The lines are clean, the shape is timeless. The engine is a 6-cylinder, rear-mounted opposition engine. The sound is like a sewing machine with rabies. The steering wheel is light, responsive. And the most important thing is balance. The car doesn't go fast. It drives like it feels the road. In 1964, sales begin. Americans buy crazy, especially in California, where 911 becomes a symbol of a successful dude who loves cars, not just driving. The success of the 911 was resounding, but by the 1970s, silence began to overtake the Zuffenhausen plant. The world was changing. America was shaken by oil crises. The Japanese produced reliable, cheap cars, and against this background, sports coupes with a voracious engine seemed absurd. And Porsche, they were still making rear-engine sports cars with atmospheric engines, as long as the market demanded softness, comfort, and an automatic gearbox. The 911 was too rough, too noisy, too mechanical for the 70s bourgeois. Sales began to fall, and inside the company, the fear was growing. If it went on like this, we'd be shut down. And that's when, for the first time, Porsche headquarters seriously discussed killing the 911. Yes, the 911. Because it's obsolete. Because everyone's doing the front engine. Because people want comfort. Porsche start to develop 928, front-engined, with V8, with comfortable seats, air conditioning, and automatic. They're making it as a replacement for the 911. They're even reallocating budgets. They're even preparing an advertising campaign. The 928 is the next generation of Porsche, with no regard for the past, no rear engine, no nostalgia. But there was one small department in Zuffenhausen, very strange. That's where they dumped all the experimental stuff. And that's where the Type 930 came from. A prototype. no guarantees. With a small body and a big idea, let's put a turbine in it. In 1975, Porsche introduced the 911 Turbo 930, 3 liters, turbocharged, 260 horsepower, and no assist, no traction control, no ABS, no brains. This car didn't forgive mistakes. You hit the wrong button, you're in the pole. You let off the gas in a corner, you go ass first. They called it a second-hand car. And still people bought it like crazy. Why? Because it was honest. Because it was a car that challenged you. The 911 Turbo saved the 911 itself. While the 928 was winning awards in magazines, the 911 was selling. While journalists marveled at the comfort of the V8, customers wanted turbo kicks to the spine. Eventually, in the 1980s, Porsche abandoned the idea of killing the 911. The 928 remains, but as an alternative, not a successor. The 911 survived because it proved stronger than logic. While the struggle for survival was going on the assembly line, Porsche were doing wild things in racing. In 1970, they brought the Porsche 917 to Le Mans, a car weighing less than a ton, 12-cylinder engine, 240 plus miles an hour in a straight line. Aerodynamics? Almost nothing. It was a projectile on wheels. Pilots would write their wills when they got in it, because it had no chance of forgiving a mistake. But if you were accurate, you became a track god. The Porsche 917 took Le Mans, then another, then another. Then came the 956 and the 962, the cars that destroyed everything in Group C. They didn't just win, they dominated. Formula 1 level speeds, more power than a truck. Porsche built a reputation not just for making sports cars, it made weapons that were unrivaled on the track. Teams all over the world bought Porsche chassis, Porsche engines, and just stuck their team stickers on, and won. It was a golden age. Every track win lifted dealer sales. Every night at Le Mans turned into millions on the books. But Porsche knew they couldn't live on that forever. The world was changing. Electronics, ecology, turbulent markets. Porsche needed a new plan. By the late 80s, Porsche was tired. Sports cars were obsolete, gasoline was getting more expensive, and Americans no longer wanted tough German tractors without cup holders and an automatic. The 911 still sold, but not like it used to. The 928, 944, 968 seemed good, but each model was pulling in development money, and the output was weak. The company was going down, not with a bang, but with a lingering, depressing accounting tone. But then one man came along and said, "We're not going to be bankrupt, we're going to be hunters." His name was Wendelin Wiedeking, a simple engineer, no glamour, no racing background. But with one phrase, he walked into the boardroom with, "We're going to be the most profitable in the world, even if we have to sell crossovers to do it." It sounded like heresy, but he was right. The first step is the Boxster, 1996, a small roadster with an engine in the middle. Cheaper, simpler, closer to the youth. Journalists rolled their eyes. How could you? You have a 911. And the market said, "Give me 2. The Boxster saved the company from going bust. It was made in a factory in Finland. Yes, Finland, because it was cheaper. Porsche's philosophy began to change. Engineering remained, but pragmatism was added. But the main demonic move was later, 2002. Porsche launches the Cayenne, SUV, a crossover, a fucking family barn. It was a shock. Porsche? With a high center of gravity? Ferry would have rolled over in his grave. Fans were spitting. Forums were abuzz. Memes were drawn. But sales were so high, the factories couldn't cope. With the money from the Cayenne, the company got everything. New facilities, fresh R&D centers, and most importantly, time. And now, revenge. By 2005, Porsche wasn't just on the plus side anymore. They were the most profitable car company on the planet. And then Wiedeking decided to gobble up Volkswagen. Yes, you heard me. Little Porsche decided to buy the huge Volkswagen. They bought up shares through a clever structure, Porsche SE, and then yanked the market. VW didn't know what was going on, and Porsche was buying, and more, and more, and more, and more. In 2008, Porsche owned almost 75% of Volkswagen. And then, for the first time in history, the tiny sports car company had a chance to become the owner of a concern with Audi, Skoda, Seat, Bentley, Bugatti, and Lamborghini. But it wasn't all that smooth. Wiedeking overestimated its strength. 2008, financial crisis. Creditors froze. Stocks started to fall. And then it became clear that to complete the takeover, tens of billions more were needed. Porsche didn't have that money, but Volkswagen did. And that's when everything turned upside down. Eat or be eaten, Volkswagen said. Oh, you wanted to buy us? Well, now we're buying you. And started buying the controlling stake back. shares, stakes, tips, politicians. Everything is in play. Porsche, with the ambition of an empire, found itself a debtor, not an owner. Wiedeking was fired, the deal was closed, and in 2012, Porsche officially became part of the VAG group. Irony? No, it was a trick. Because inside VAG, Porsche was left with autonomy. They still designed the 911. They were still running the race. They were still building what they wanted. But now, with VAG money, with access to Audi technology, with shared platforms, the Panamera, the Macan, the Taycan, they all got technology from the group. But they're still Porsche in feel. The takeover story is not a failure. It was one of the most audacious moves in the history of the auto industry. Porsche lost, but came out stronger, because the engineering spirit remained. While business analysts clapped their hands at Cayenne sales, the engineers at Weissach were doing what they did best, building a dream. The Carrera GT project was born by accident. The engine from Porsche's LMP racing program, which was cancelled, was left over. V10, 5.7 liters, furious, mechanical. Any other car would have gone into a museum. But Porsche decided, let's make a supercar, but in our own way. In 2003, the Carrera GT was launched. Carbon fiber chassis, manual gearbox, carbon ceramic mechanical clutch, 0-60 in 3.5 seconds, 205 miles per hour top speed, no traction control, no insurance, no margin for error. This was a car you had to know how to drive, not just press the sport button. Journalists raved, fans worshipped, but the Carrera GT wasn't about admiration, it was about fighting itself at speed. In 2013, Paul Walker died on a highway in California driving this very car, and the whole world realized the Carrera GT is a weapon, not for the weak, not for ponces, but for those who can. 10 years later, the 918 Spider comes out. The technological antipode, hybrid, electric motors, e-power mode, batteries. But God forbid you think this is a Prius on steroids. Total power, 887 horsepower. 60 miles, 2.2 seconds. Nürburgring lap, 6:57. It was quieter, smarter, more sophisticated, but still a Porsche down to the last cog. The 918 was the answer to the era. Yes, we can make an eco-friendly supercar. Yes, it can be faster than a V12. And yes, it still feels like a Porsche. The Carrera GT is the last analog legend. The 918 is the first digital revelation. And both are proof that at Porsche, engineers are more important than marketers. The world is finally going electric. Tesla is not just a hype, it's a revolution. All the auto giants are frantically drawing platforms, tearing up prototypes, panicking, and Porsche is silent. They're not rushing, they are observing. And it's not until 2019 that they show the Taycan, not an electric 911, but a new paradigm. The Taycan is like if an iPhone and a touring car made a baby. It's fast, it's precise, it's quiet, and best of all, it still behaves like a Porsche. No other electric car drives with such responsiveness. The brakes are like a blade. The steering wheel is like a nervous system. Everything that seemed dead in electric cars lives here, but fans are still divided. Some say it's a masterpiece. Others whisper it's no longer a Porsche. But the engineer's answer is simple. Sit down, take it for a drive, and then decide. The Taycan is a crossing of eras, not just a new model, but an attempt to save the soul of the brand in a world where there is no gasoline and no engine sound. In 75 years, Porsche has been on the edge, at the top, at the bottom, in submission, alone, in the clouds. But it has always remained itself. The engineering philosophy, the stubbornness, the passion for balance, they've persisted even in the age of hybrids, SUVs and electric cars. And when you get behind the wheel of any Porsche, whether it's an old 944, an Ultimatum GT3 RS, or even a Macan, something awakens in you that other cars don't have. Because Porsche isn't just a piece of machinery, it's an idea, an obsessive idea, that a car should be alive, that every movement of the steering wheel should trigger a response in your spine, that every corner is a negotiation between driver and road. Porsche is the only brand that doesn't just make sports cars, it makes tools. For those who understand, there is no ponce in this brand. There's no fake, there's no for everyone. There's just you and the road. And once you've felt that once, you'll never get into just a car again.